Hello again, School Bus friends. I'm Amanda Huggett, Executive Editor of School Bus Fleet. Thanks for joining me on today's run. Today we're talking about something that can make a big difference for budgets. And that's cooperative purchasing. I know that contracts and procurement doesn't exactly scream exhilarating, but I promise you want to hear what my guests today have to say. But first, let me thank the sponsor of the route, IC Bus. The next generation is here and is ahead of its class. Let's get rolling. If you've ever had to bid buses, tires, camera, routing software, you know how time consuming that RFP process can be. So I invited my friends from Sourcewell on to share their experience and expertise in this very space. We're going to break down cooperative purchasing in plain language, what it is, how it works, and how districts can use it to save both time and money. Here's the interview. Okay, now I am joined by Andy Campbell, Director of Cooperative Contracts, and Steph Eckes, the Director of Government Accounts, both at Sourcewell, located in Minnesota, where I am too. So hello, my fellow Minnesotans. Thank you for joining us on the route today. We're so happy to have you.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, today we're going to talk all things. It's going to be a fascinating conversation about cooperative purchasing, budgets, and contracts. Viewers, I do promise you this is going to be interesting. And the reason that this episode is happening is in large part because of Andy at our SBFX event last fall. You did a sponsored presentation on what Sourcewell does. And I noticed there were a lot of questions from districts who didn't fully understand how it even worked, how it might benefit them. So that's why I want to bring this to you now. For those who are watching this episode and are unfamiliar with cooperative purchasing and what that even means, can you break that down? How does it work? And especially in the context of our industry and school transportation.
Yeah, I can start and Andy will chime in, I'm
Sure.
sure. Cooperative purchasing is a process where a public agency essentially completes that RFP process, and it allows other government, education, or nonprofits to utilize that process. So for example, at Sourcewell as a government entity, we do the RFP process where we develop the scope, we post it nationwide, we go through the dated and time stamped response, we go through the scoring, and then we award the contract. Which does allow other entities, as I said, to utilize that contract in place of their own process.
So, for example, let's say a transportation director is looking to buy new school buses. A really common method for them to do that is either they'll do their own bid and they'll work with procurement to go through those exact same steps themselves, or they'll use a state contract. If they choose to use a state contract, that's cooperative purchasing. It's the state conducted the original RFP, did the evaluation, scored, and awarded contracts, and then school districts were going to use that state contract. The biggest difference between when Sourcewell does it versus when a state does it is a state is doing that on behalf of itself and all cities and counties or school districts, perhaps, within that one state. When Sourcewell does it, we're doing it on behalf of the entire country. So the volume that is being run through a Sourcewell contract is generally and often substantially higher than what a state would do on its own. Now, that doesn't guarantee that our pricing is going to be better than a state, but what it does is it definitely ensures, because of the process that we follow, it oftentimes is giving a school district, since we're talking with School Bus Fleet here, a school district more choice. A lot of times when a state does a state bid, they tend to get a little bit narrow in their scope and what they're looking for. And they may say, hey, we're going to award this dealer with these things. We're going to award this dealer with this, so that they can kind of spread their business around. Well, that dealer then may say, well, great, you gave me one slice of my pie, not the whole thing. And I have so much more to offer my clients, but state, you only gave me so much of it. Or a state contract oftentimes is very restrictive in what it allows an awarded dealer to do. So maybe a client might come to that dealership and say, yeah, I want to buy this item through the state contract, but I also
Mhm.
need this and this and this and this. Well, the
Right.
state contract doesn't allow for those because it's outside. Our contracts are designed with incredible flexibility to not only meet all of those same state requirements, but it also allows that client to say, well, hey, we want onboard cameras, we want onboard Wi-Fi, we want cappuccino machines, like whatever that school district may want for their needs. And since we're on the topic of school
Mhm.
buses, I can also assure your listeners that all national and state specifications that are required by law for a school bus purchase
Mhm.
are also met by our contracts as well. I just wanted to make sure that that point was made.
Okay. Now you work with a ton of different suppliers, obviously the bus dealers, the OEMs, but then down to those smaller vendors, if you're talking about routing systems or telematics or like you just said, cameras. And when you mentioned that school districts working with you get more choice, does that mean through the RFP process they can still select which vendor they want in that specific category? How does that work exactly?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, I would go so far as to say that's actually one of the drawbacks when a school district conducts their own bid is they don't know at the end of their process who is going to ultimately end up being awarded. They
Mm,
can only restrict through specifications so far before the district attorney is going to be like, well, hold on. Now you've completely eliminated the competitive nature to this because it's so restrictive.
yeah.
So there's a lot of times, and I know there's a lot of school districts that are going to be listening to this that know painfully well what it's like to end up with the low bid. And they're like, that's not who we wanted. In fact,
Mm,
I would argue that probably 99% of all school districts going into a bidding situation know in advance who they actually want to work with. And usually that supplier was the one that worked alongside them to help write the spec. But now they just have to go through kind of the dog and pony show of this, open, fair, and transparent competitive solicitation. And fingers crossed, hope that somebody at the ninth hour doesn't come in and undercut anybody who didn't take any time to build a relationship with that director, that has any quality or credibility or serviceability, their warrant, like all of the reasons why a transportation director chooses the suppliers that they like to work with.
hmm
Now,
Okay.
still, a school district's going to do what they can to try to make sure that all bidders are qualified.
Mhm.
But again, they can only restrict so far. And anybody can make claims in a response.
hmm
And we're no different. We have found, even in our own processes, that we've had suppliers make claims and are awarded contracts based on those claims. They have to sign an affidavit saying they're truthful. But then when we find out they were just, sitting back waiting for orders to come rolling in, it's no different for a school district. Somebody can just come in and give a response, but really ultimately never intended to begin with to fulfill those claims. All the while, the supplier the district wanted to work with is now sitting on
hmm
the outside going, great, somebody underbid me and now I'm out. So how did the school really win in that situation then? They didn't.
Yeah.
And I
Could
would add to
bring.
that as well is you also run that risk of getting no responses. So there's a lot of times
Oh.
where the district and the transportation director will go through all that work, developing the scope, put it out on the street, and no one responds. And so now they're back to starting over, and then they're having to do that legwork. So maybe they haven't identified someone. There's a lot of time and effort
Yeah.
that goes into that process to then not get any responses. So
Yeah.
again, Sourcewell, we do the framework of it, and you still, the transportation director still can come in and evaluate what we've done, but they don't have
hmm
all of that time as involved as they would be if they were doing their own.
Yeah. So, Steph, how does it work if there's a school district who they know that they need XYZ solution or product, but
Yeah.
they don't feel like the experts in it yet? They maybe don't even know, but they don't know. Do you help them sort of navigate that process? Are you a partner throughout the whole process?
Yeah, we're absolutely a partner. So kind of like the process itself is obviously first they're going to identify their need, right?
Hmm.
Then they can reach out to our team. So our team is really here to support public K-12 in all of our districts. And so once we know what it is that they're looking for, we're going to ask kind of some of those deeper questions. Do they have a specific manufacturer in mind? Get more of those specs of what they're looking for. And then we're going to get them connected with all of the suppliers that we have that meet those requirements or ideas that they have. Once we get them connected with those suppliers, they'll start to build that relationship and continue to vet it further. So it really then
Okay.
becomes kind of that transition over to the district and the suppliers. Once they find the supplier that they like, that they want to move forward with, they'll get the
Hmm.
quote and they work through the purchasing process directly with that supplier. Our team is certainly here to help and support them throughout that process, but we don't need to be a part of it either. So,
Yeah, gotcha. Okay. Um, there are other cooperative purchasing partners out there, but what makes what you do different or better for our industry specifically?
Two sides to this, to the answer to that question. I'm going to give, I think, from the supplier
yeah.
perspective, and then I
Okay.
think Steph can certainly chime in. But you're right, there are many cooperative purchasing organizations throughout our country. Many of them have really sprouted up just in the last several years. Sourcewell
Okay.
has been around since 1978.
Great.
We've been usually, if not the first co-op in a given category, we're one of the first. No other co-op in the country got into school buses when we did back
Yeah.
in 2006, 2007. But, we've been offering school buses on a cooperative contract for at least 20 years now. But I think from a consumer standpoint, I think it says a lot when you're dealing with somebody that's been in the industry for a long time and has
Yeah.
understood how buyers buy. They
Mhm.
understand what suppliers are looking for as well. And I would say that one of the things that we hear often from our supplier community, the reason why they choose and go after a contract so hard with Sourcewell is the unmatched service that they receive from Sourcewell. And I know that Steph's team can say the same thing
Mhm.
from a client perspective. Our suppliers love the fact that we care deeply about their success because we know that our clients vote with their wallets.
Yeah.
And if our contracts are not providing the value to our suppliers to use, they're not going to sell off of them. And so we need our suppliers to understand that our clients need them. And we, more importantly, are providing support and training for that supplier on how
Okay.
to sell into the public sector using their contract. That's one thing that, quite frankly, no other co-op in the country even comes close to
Yeah.
doing, is the level of support and training that we offer. The
Okay.
other,
Makes sense.
I would say, kind of key piece to this is that because we're a government agency, we're not driven by money. We're not driven by
Right.
profit. We don't have shareholders that are investors in that cooperative that are going to be expecting a dividend back.
Hmm.
We're a government agency. Steph and I are public employees, no different than a public school district transportation director
Yeah.
or a procurement person. What drives us is serving and serving others.
So one thing I would just add to it is kind of going a little bit deeper on the service minded. So some of the ways
Hmm.
that Sourcewell gives back is specifically to K-12 is through our partnership with AASA, which is the
Oh.
superintendent's organization. And so we're doing a lot of different scholarships, aspiring superintendents. We do mini grants where we just
Mm.
awarded, I think it was 28 districts for $3,500 to do different things that they had submitted requests for. So we very much are service minded, as Andy said, and I'll just hit again on, he said that we started in 78. But we started as a service unit. So our heart really is K-12 and continuing to serve public education.
I love that. Amazing. Andy, when you were talking about, you make sure that your suppliers meet the needs of the districts, how do you vet the companies that you partner with and offer as some of the vendors, to make sure that they are going to be able to meet expectations?
Yeah, it's a great question, and one that I would say is kind of a two-level answer. The first level is through our competitive solicitation process, the questions that a supplier has to answer during that competitive solicitation process, it really filters kind of the chaff out of
Mm.
contenders from the pretenders.
Ooh, okay.
We're asking some very pointed and very specific questions about performance. How long have they been in the industry? Are they new? Do they have the financial strength and stability to be around for another 5, 10, 20, 80 years, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, the companies that have only been around for a couple of years, that raises red flags for us and not necessarily precludes them, but it's certainly
Yeah.
something that we have to be a lot more mindful of versus a company that's been around for 100 years and has been, widely regarded as the industry leader. Marketplace successes is something that is a scorable question. We want to know, how long have you been around? Are you credible? Can clients rely on your dealer network? And all of that gets fleshed out during that solicitation and evaluation process. So that's kind of part one. Part two, then, once our procurement team has awarded contracts and then they've come over to my team where we now have to manage that relationship over the term of that contract, is that's also a part of our job, is to make sure, hey, are you performing to the level that you committed to in your response? And clearly, one of the most obvious ways that we can measure is, are they generating any sales using their contract? And reporting is a critical piece to contract compliance.
Yes.
And so that's a huge part to what my team and I are monitoring from a performance perspective is, are they making sales? If they're not, we start asking tough questions. They hear from customers. You know, Customers are not going to be shy when a supplier is not performing. And
That's
I
right.
know that they're going to go to Steph's team and let them know if one of our suppliers is not doing what that customer expected.
Yeah.
I think
Good.
that's the other value that Sourcewell brings, is that we do have the two teams. So my team is solely focused on working with the districts, where Andy has more focus on the supplier side. And so when our two teams work together, that's where the real chemistry is, but also kind of differentiates us from other cooperatives as well.
Yeah. Awesome. So, Steph, let's kind of take a step back here and walk through the entire process. So, if
Okay.
there's a district who wants to try working with Sourcewell, how do they get started? Do they reach out to you first? Do they have a vendor in mind? And what does it look like from that point on?
Yeah, it can go both ways. So I'll take you down the first path where you said they can reach out to us first. They absolutely can reach out to Sourcewell. We'll give them an account ID. So every district will have an account. There's no cost. There's no requirement to purchase from us. It's simply a purchasing option for them. So they can reach out to us. We'll walk them through all of the contracts. In some cases, it's taking them through the website to show them the landing pages where they can find the contract documents so they can match it up to their process. But that also gives them context to each one of the suppliers as well. So we'll do a nice overview, kind of get them off and running. But if they have someone specific in mind, they can definitely go directly to that supplier. And usually the conversation is, look, I'd like to use Sourcewell. Here's my account ID. And asking that supplier to then quote them off of the Sourcewell contract.
Okay.
So kind of like what I mentioned earlier, if they have identified a bus manufacturer, they can have that direct conversation with the dealer. We don't have to be involved, but we're happy to be looped in and help answer any questions at any point in the conversation.
Okay, gotcha. What about how customizable are some of the solutions? Can districts choose, between option A, B, C, D, or are they kind of set with one based on how cooperative purchasing works or doesn't work?
Yeah, that's a great question, and one that I wish more clients would ask.
Mm,
I think a lot of times, because any school district, for example, that's really accustomed to using a state contract, I think they just assume that that's how kind of all contracts
mhm.
then are set up, and that's just simply not the case. By design, and I've been here for 15 years, and it's been like this ever since I've been around. Our contracts are intentionally designed to be very wide in terms of depth and breadth of solutions. We're inviting and expecting a supplier to be responding with their entire catalog. We're not
Okay.
looking for small pieces of the pie and then on our end trying to create the whole meal by going, well, only you get this and only you get that. Nope.
Yeah.
We want your entire portfolio so that when the client has been reached out to by that dealer, or if they're a direct sales model from the sales rep, is nothing's off limits. They can come in with the whole catalog and therefore provide a full turnkey solution for the school district. So the school district doesn't have to sit back and go, okay, well, wait a minute, how do I integrate this piece from you and this piece from you?
Mhm.
And that's the beauty of utilizing a
Yeah.
Sourcewell contract with our awarded suppliers, is by design, we are looking for turnkey solutions,
Mhm.
one-stop shopping. So when the client maybe needs to put a whole new fuel island at their bus garage, or maybe they need to install a bunch of charging stations for
Mhm.
electric buses and electric vehicles, or maybe they're looking at implementing a full telematics program now on all school district assets. They can come and find solution providers that can do it all for them through their Sourcewell contract. And
Right.
that is where I feel some of our greatest, almost misunderstood value is to the client communities.
Mm.
They don't always understand, wow, Sourcewell really does have everything that I need. And that's another benefit for the client, is choice.
Okay, I want to talk about some of the advantages of cooperative purchasing, and you've mentioned quite a few already. But if we drill down really into costs and pricing and the budgets, I think that's where, the biggest benefit probably is, and especially the most attractive to school districts. We all know they have limited resources, especially in transportation. So, what are some of those cost savings that your customers see from working with you?
Yeah, I think one of the things that we hear often that I think districts don't realize is the cost savings comes with a lot of the time and the folks that are involved with doing the process. So think about the time of the transportation director to now work with the business office and any others to develop the scope and do all of those steps of the RFP process itself. And so you're saving all of that time, which allows that transportation director to be working on something else. I'm sure they
Yeah.
have a million other things that they could be working on, as
Mhm.
well as the business office, or as well as any other person that was pulled into that process. So there's so much savings there. But then you also factor in the cost savings of just the cooperative contract itself. There's wide ranges of percentages and discounts and things like that we see across the board. forward. And I think sometimes people forget tires, like
Mhm.
you have to buy tires, right? And so the cost savings on all of the little things, not just the bus itself, which I feel like we focused a lot on the buses today, but it's all of the maintenance and the parts and the tires and everything else that goes along with it too. So
Yeah,
No
good point.
question. I would also expand on that by saying that every Sourcewell contract, when a school district takes the time to just read through any supplier's response, one of the biggest questions that we ask that's a part of the scoring for the pricing part of the response is to characterize what is the pricing that is being proposed here. Is it basically the same as they give anybody off the street? Is
Yeah.
it better than what they give for any normal government discount? Is it the same that they would give to a state or other GPO? So right away, any client can go right into the response of any supplier and look and say, oh, this particular supplier said that the pricing that they gave Sourcewell is the best that they offer anybody, or it's at minimum as good as a state is going to get. Well, if the state's getting it, that's what I've been using all the time anyways. And I don't think that we can overstate what Steph just said from a time savings standpoint. I think as public servants, we naturally don't give ourselves enough credit on what our time is worth.
Yeah.
And that is hands down a massive savings and a massive load of stress off of a purchasing person's mind, or even an end user like a transportation director, to say, look, if I could buy the same way that the private sector does, boy, would that be a load off of my mind. And the Sourcewell contract is the great equalizer. Using a cooperative contract is a massive leveling of the playing field between the public sector and the private sector. Because once that district has realized and done their due diligence to say, yes, we're legally allowed to use cooperative purchasing as a compliant way to purchase,
Mhm.
it's a game changer for those school districts.
yeah. It's
Okay.
actually a strategy that we've been sharing with a lot of districts, because a lot of districts have certain thresholds where they still have to do the process themselves. And we completely understand that. But we've been talking with districts about the strategy of evaluate what you do need to do yourselves and make a list of those that you don't, and then start reaching out to Sourcewell. Engage
Okay.
us in that conversation, and we'll start helping you identify which contracts we have where we can take some of that work off your plate so that you can focus more of your time on those that you do have to do yourself. So
Yeah.
engage us in that strategy conversation. And we're starting to do that like a year, 2 years in advance now, and really helping to support the districts that way.
Awesome. Now, Andy, I mentioned that you were at SBFX and you fielded a lot of questions last year. And Steph, I know you were there the year before doing the same. What are some of those most common questions or misunderstandings or misconceptions that districts might have about working with you, or hangups? Anything that you can clarify right now to a broader audience?
Do you want to start?
Yeah, I'll start. I think quite often that they can't, because they've not ever heard of their district utilizing a cooperative contract in the past. And so usually it just is a quick conversation. And sometimes it's us doing a little bit of research on our end to say, actually, your district has been buying all of your technology through Sourcewell. And it's kind of that mind-blowing moment where we just have to have the conversation.
I think one thing that kind of struck me, it almost had me kind of sitting back in my seat, was actually how genuinely disappointed transportation directors seemed to be when they learned that we've been buying as a district, we've been buying through Sourcewell in all of these other areas of our district, yet my department has been left out of this conversation. Why is that? And I don't want to put any blame on purchasing because I highly doubt anybody was intentionally keeping transportation in the dark.
Yeah.
What I said in those situations is I wouldn't doubt if your purchasing person just had no idea that all of these transportation director specific solutions even existed.
Yeah.
And that goes back to some of the comments that we've made earlier, where clients just don't understand the depth and breadth of our contracts. They'll be brought to us by technology or, one of our other commodity contracts, for example, because they're the most widely used contracts at the district level. And they just that's where their focus stayed. And they didn't realize or ask the question, I wonder what else Sourcewell has that can help maybe
Right.
buildings and grounds, transportation, our athletic department, like all of the other areas of a school that require something to be purchased, we have contracts for. And I think that was, for me, again, sitting in these meetings, talking to transportation directors and having them just scratching their heads with frustration going, I hate bidding buses. I
Yeah.
hate bidding fuel. I hate bidding tires. I'll tell you, every single transportation director that's listening to this call right now, they understand the difference between cost and price. Purchasing doesn't always understand that because it's not a priority. Like, their priority is compliance. Their
Yeah.
priority is efficiency. And that almost directly contradicts that difference between cost and price, because total cost of ownership doesn't show up on a bid. Just the cost of acquisition is what's
Right.
showing up on a bid. But a
Yeah.
district, like the school board, doesn't see that. Purchasing doesn't see that. Who sees
Well,
it?
they don't
The
live that every
transportation
day.
director and their mechanics.
Yeah.
And when a school bus is down, that's not a good thing. Like,
No.
who's picking those kids up, right? If a charging station isn't working, that school bus isn't leaving the yard. Right? Like, there's a lot of different solutions that transportation directors have to be constantly monitoring and mindful of. I can tell you, every transportation director listening probably has a low bid story that they try every day from the day that happened going forward to not repeat it.
Well, and I think the unfortunate reality is that transportation is sort of used to being left out a little, even when we have conversations about IEPs and transporting students with special needs. There is this communication gap that exists in so many districts where transportation is so often the afterthought. And it's really frustrating when you know that there's an easier way to do things, but you're up against, this system that doesn't always welcome you in. And so we're always reminding people, to be that squeaky wheel. Push yourself in, do what you need to do to make your department run as best as it can. But what advice do you have for districts running up against that? And the transportation team specifically?
Yeah.
Well, my advice, I would say right off the hop, is we know your world. For example, McKinney-Vento, if you don't have a child with special needs, that's not even on your radar. And therefore,
Mm,
it's not often on the radar of a school district or a school board. Not
right.
always going to be front of mind for even purchasing, but it's for sure front and center for the transportation director because they've got to, meet those requirements. Well, Sourcewell listened. And thankfully, through Steph's team, they get voice of the customer and they bring that back to our procurement department and our category development team. And we're constantly innovating and coming up with more and more contract categories to hit some of these niche, areas of needs for school districts. And so we listened, and we have an alternative student transportation category. We have contracts that offer, maybe school districts are really, really hurting right now, and they had to lay off mechanics. And now maintaining buses or other
Yeah.
district fleet assets is really becoming a challenge. we actually have garage maintenance services that
Mhm.
we have providers that can work with school districts to help them with maintaining their fleet assets. I mean, these
Great.
are like niche things that you don't often see with other cooperatives. You don't always see with state contracts either. That's another area that I feel really sets Sourcewell apart, is that we're listening and we care about all of the areas of a school district that need help.
Yeah.
And even going so far as to say, we've got contracts for tax exempt municipal financing. That's a specific type of financing only for public sector. And so we have a lot of schools that say, hey, look, our needs are $50 million, but guess what? Our capital budget is only $25 million. Well, there's
Mhm.
$25 million of need that are not going to get met. Sourcewell has solutions to help that school district meet that $25 budget shortfall
Mhm.
through tax exempt municipal financing. I mean, I'm just giving you a lot of different examples of areas that we can help school districts that most of them just don't understand that are even available to
Yeah.
them through a cooperative.
Yeah. And Amanda,
Okay.
I'll just touch on that a little bit too, because you made a really good point about the student with the IEP and the communication. And so I would encourage the transportation directors that are maybe feeling a little stuck to reach out. Let's engage in the conversation. Let us take a look at what your district has bought from other cooperative contracts, and let's work together. Maybe it's a joint meeting with the purchasing office. Maybe we have
Okay.
to get our government relations team involved to evaluate if they really truly can or not, because we can't give a yes, you can always use our contracts, but we can give you our process and show you what we've done. And then you can take that to the business office to see what boxes it's checked, or if there's anything else that we need to look into to help support you. So if you're feeling stuck and you have questions, reach out, engage in the conversation, and we'll do everything we can to support you. So,
Awesome. Good to hear. Well, you very clearly are passionate about this industry and very experienced in it. So thank you for what you do. Before we wrap, are there any parting thoughts you want to share with our viewers, or kind of what's your key takeaway for someone watching this episode?
I would say that we're here to support you. As Andy and I both stated early on, we're a service-driven organization, and we're really trying to make your lives easier so that you can help kids at the end of the day and help your community and support in the ways that you need to. We're trying to make the purchasing process easier. And so I would just say reach out. Let's have a conversation. If you have something that you need to buy right away, let's talk about that. If you want to talk about strategy for 2 years or turning over your fleet to electric, let's talk about that.
I'd say from my perspective, don't be afraid to challenge the status quo. I have had literally thousands of conversations over the years where whether it's been a transportation director, a fleet manager, a public works director, looked at cooperative purchasing and probably initially felt, oh my gosh, is that going to be as much work dealing with my purchasing department as if I were just going to do a bid? And ultimately realize when they stepped out of their comfort zone and approached purchasing and approached it with the mentality of, I need to know why we're not doing this. I need to
Yeah.
understand because this seems to make sense to me. And when they had those conversations with purchasing, and again, tone and approach can play into this,
Yep.
but we're pleasantly surprised to realize that it just opened a massive door to help
Mhm.
across multiple departments for that school, that city, that county.
Yeah.
And for the transportation director that discovers that their school district already is using Sourcewell already, well, that's
Mhm.
already a good news because there's a step now that doesn't have to be necessarily taken because clearly your district's already doing it. We're so thankful on the supplier side that we have colleagues on the government accounts team that are actively calling on and talking to school districts to have those kind of conversations
Yeah.
because Steph and her team aren't selling anything. And so I think what that does is it it lowers the guard a little bit than when a supplier is calling on a district, because no matter how polite you are and how genuine you are, at the end of the day, you're selling something. And that's great. That's
Yeah.
your job. That's what you're supposed to do. And districts respect that. But I think when they're dealing with a salesperson, there's almost a natural
Hmm.
wall up
Hmm.
that they have to be guarded in what they say, what they maybe admit to. With us being a fellow government agency, just like we have no other skin in the game other than we're doing what we were created to do, and that
Hmm.
is to serve you.
Yeah.
And so there's a just this natural trust that really kind of begins to build, because we're here to just help. Like,
Hmm.
that's what we do. That's what we exist to do. And ultimately, I think the school districts that I think latch onto that idea realize, wow, my value to my local taxpayers, my job, I just elevated my value because of what I found and am bringing to my school district to
Yeah.
help us be better.
Yeah.
Good. Well, that's great advice and very well said for both of you on all points. And thank you so much for sharing your expertise and your knowledge and your tips with our readers. And if you're watching this and you want to try out cooperative purchasing for the first time, please reach out to Sourcewell and we'll be happy to help you. Thank you, Andy. Thank you, Steph. It's
Thanks
been
for
a
having
Yeah.
us. Appreciate
Thanks.
it.
well, that wraps today's conversation. If you're a transportation director who feels stuck in the cycle of bidding, hopefully this gives you a clearer picture of what cooperative purchasing actually looks like. Remember, the takeaway is this: ask questions, challenge the status quo, and make sure your department has a seat at the table when purchasing decisions are being made. Remember, you can find more school bus headlines and hot topics on our website anytime. Be sure to follow our YouTube channel and connect with us on social media. Another big thank you again to our sponsor of the route, IC Bus, proudly offering vehicles and solutions that are ahead of its class. We'll see you again soon. Thanks for riding with us.